Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the flow state and how we understand it, how we understand the natural and intrinsic spontaneity of the flow state. Because, of course, when we enter into flow states in our everyday life, this state of consciousness is defined by spontaneity, is defined by its unpredictability. Such as when I make this video, where I do not have a anchoring script or anything to kind of guide me. It is essentially a free association. When you're free associating on something, you are opening yourselves up to this sense of exploration, this sense of discovery. You begin a task and you do not quite know where you're going with it. And there is this deep sense of openness. This deep sense of openness and, in fact, curiosity. And I think there is something deeply beautiful and human about this whole domain of flow states and opening ourselves up to new things. Because these are essentially the core pillars of what meditation is. You know, when we reach a degree of meditative realization, what we seem to dissolve into is this state of being which is crucially defined by spontaneity. And I myself have been recently researching a bit more about Buddhism and the life of Buddha and how do they describe the general habits and the nature of being of these sort of realized yogis and sages. What is a sort of a common essence that I've sort of extracted from this is that their existence is defined by spontaneity. They're not really deeply, consciously deliberative. In other words, they're not really ruminating about the past or the future, the various anxieties that commonly grip us and arrest our awareness. They are deeply embedded in the here and now. They're living fully in the moment, so to speak. And I suppose as I sit quietly and watch this very moment, I understand directly, intuitively, what this spontaneity means. This spontaneity of watching each thought, feeling, and sensation simply arise in awareness. And of course, like I said many times, we do not pick the thoughts that arise into our consciousness. They simply bubble up like hiccups, so to speak. And all we can perhaps say is that we are the mere witness of this arising. We simply watch it arise, and when we reside as that watcher, when we reside as that observer, I'm just going to find a nicer spot because my eyes are getting scalded by the sun. But same position, but never mind. I'll just close my eyes and speak. You know, I wanted to record outside because it's quite a nice ambiance. You get the sun, but at this time of day there's the sun directly on my face, which is not ideal. But hey ho. Minor aside, yeah, when we reside as the watcher of our consciousness, this creates a sense of distance between us and the contents of our consciousness. And as I've spoken about in the case of addiction, a central conscious transformation that has to come in order to become detached from our desires and our cravings and the various things that pull us into these habitual compulsions is the cultivation of a distance, cultivation of an awareness that is able to watch the desires bubble up, but is aware enough to not impulsively react to them. What this is essentially is the cultivation of the habit of non-reactivity. Because when we have non-reactivity, we can be still and stable even when the external world is chaotic. I myself, in my many travels within India, for example, a country which is renowned for its noise and chaos and car honks, this environment is perhaps one of the best environments for really testing your sense of inner stillness and your calmness despite chaos. And I found it a profound initiation into maintaining an inner calm despite all sorts of stimulation on the outside world. It's easy to meditate when you're alone in a cave, far away from any human civilization. It's much more difficult to meditate when you're surrounded by honks and dust from the roads and noisy rickshaws and, people shouting and whatever. That imposes a different sort of test. And it's a test whereby you have to be able to watch and observe, yet not overly indulgent in your frustration. Because as you train your consciousness enough, and I just describe it as training because, these are certain, in some sense, these are certain skills of mind that we develop and cultivate so that we can almost internally shift our consciousness rather than allow the external to shift our consciousness. And when we develop these abilities to internally shift our consciousness, we can then choose to be happy, so to speak. We can choose to be blissful. We can choose to be calm. And we do not need certain things outside of ourselves to make us happy. Because at the end of the day, we pursue certain external states, certain external modifications of our environment, whether it be a job or a particular luxury item or a particular house or a car, whatever material thing. We pursue those things because we believe that they will create this feeling within us. And that feeling is, of course, a subjective state. We're always pursuing subjective states of happiness or things that we believe will make us happy. And, if we knew that buying that new big house wasn't really going to make us happy, would we still do it? Would we still pursue and chase and strive for the external things if we knew that we were not going to get any real feeling from it? Now, of course, many of us, we do get a feeling. We do get a feeling when we have a sudden career success or a positive change in our relationships or, anything good in the outside world happening. We do experience this surge of euphoria and happiness. Though, of course, because our happiness is a response to a short-term change, the happiness very quickly fades. And we return to our baseline. And as we return to our baseline, we then think, okay, well, I need to chase or strive for something else in order to recapture that surge, to recapture that hit. And many people define happiness in this sort of way, as this constant sequence of tasks to get hit after hit after hit. But it's like a wave that goes up and then down and up and down. There's happiness and then come down, disappointment, and then that creates the striving for the next sort of wave. What is there as a way to transcend all of this? What if there was a way to raise your baseline? To have this state of immovable contentment that is not conditioned by external things. This doesn't mean that we should not care about the external world. What I'm trying to ask you to consider is whether there is a way of being content and peaceful with who you are already. And what this means that is when you have these short-term successes, you still feel the bliss. You feel the happiness, the surge of that sort of thing. But when that bliss sort of slowly dwindles down, you won't feel disappointed. You'll be like, oh, well, that was nice. I'm still okay, you know? I don't need that sort of thing. It's a happy little surprise. And of course, when you have that high baseline, when you have the inevitable disappointments of life, they don't sting as hard. You know that that disappointment will, like the bliss, it will pass. Because all things, of course, pass. So that's the nature of impermanence. So when we understand that all of these external things that shape our happiness are ultimately transient and fleeting, what is the purpose in attaching our happiness so intensely to such things? What purpose does it serve other than to make us slaves to such things? I think psychological liberation stems in this ability to be radically content with your existence, regardless of wherever you are. No matter how joyful or how much suffering you are sitting in, if you can take that moment of a breath to look at this moment and be like, I accept this moment. That is paradoxically the hardest and yet the easiest thing that we can do, to accept this very moment in its entirety and to be present with it. But that, of course, is the nature of meditation. To see clearly without this desire to change. But yeah, I think I'll leave that at that. Hope it's been useful and insightful, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye, everyone.